Ladies and gentlemen, please have a warm round of applause for Egert and Valmra.
Well, hello there. I'm quite thankful that I don't have to talk about batteries too much today because, yes, we are in the business of storage, in this case, energy storage, but not with batteries. And that's a load off my chest. Otherwise, I would have escaped just in case. So what has energy storage to do with logistics? Mobility? Well, I'll say physics. Gravity, you have to fight gravity. A crane has to fight gravity to lift something up. Why not use it while coming down, while lowering the load? Or try another law of physics mentioned earlier, the law of inertia. Something needs to get moving, but it also has to stop, at least on Earth. So this energy can be recuperated, and it has, if you want to reuse it, it has to be stored somewhere. You can use a battery, or in our case, you can buy some ultracapacitors and integrate that into your product. So, first of all, let's get the perimeter. And something's happened to the chart. So when we are talking about mobility, then it is not too difficult to discern how much CO2 emissions are there coming from mobility. And that would be black. Okay. That would be the transport part. Yes, we have aviation, which is about 2% of that. We have maritime transport, which is about 2.5% of that. And the rest are vehicles, cars, trucks, some locomotives, which still run on diesel. And, well, where do you put the electric cars? The CO2-free electric cars, the electric mobility. Well, I'm afraid you have to put it in the largest part there, the production of electricity and heat. Well, heat doesn't count, but electricity, yes. Where do you put here the warehouse logistics? Cranes, warehouse robots, and so on. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, in the same part, electricity production. So it is a little bit difficult to discern what percentage of CO2 emissions are we talking about here? But can we agree on a number? Can we agree on at least 20%? Okay, thank you for that agreement. And my claim here is that with energy storage, it is possible to reduce those emissions by at least 20%, probably 30%, and in an ideal world, 40%. So that's not too bad. And let's look at three aspects of that, where energy storage comes in. And, well, I'd like to point out mobility, obviously, logistics, obviously, and something else. Keeping the electric grid functioning. When all of this energy demand comes on at a certain time of day and it needs to be compensated somehow. So let's start on the left, mobility. You came here today how? Driving a car, using Bolt or Uber, taking a tram, using other forms of public transport, buses, trolleys, are they called? And every time they break, what do? They convert kinetic energy into heat. Yeah, it's the law of energy conservation. If you have energy moving forward, you need to convert it somehow into something else in order to stop. And trolleys and trams, actually, are interesting in the sense that they have been doing this nigh on 100 years, using an electric motor to brake and give that electricity back to the grid. So yeah, trams and trolleys have been doing this for a long time. Cars, trucks, buses, not so much. Almost not at all, but it is possible. If you drive a Tesla, it recuperates some of that energy. You need to slow down. If you drive a Nissan Leaf, same thing. Actually, this also applies to warehouses. What goes up must come down, and you can recuperate 20–30% of the energy. Which moves must also stop. Again, you can recuperate the energy to start again. Now let's come to the grid part. Let's say 50% of cars are fully electric. Everybody drives them using a huge, dreaded battery. Everybody gets to work between 8 and 9, and they plug in their cars. And all of a sudden, the grid needs to deliver a lot of power to all these cars which have been plugged in to charge the battery. Does the grid have the capability to do that? Not unless there has been very large investments into infrastructure, or a cheaper variant to do this with energy storage. So development of the grid for charging electric cars hinges to a large extent on the use of, battery storage, and I'm happy to say ultracapacitor storage. What do I mean? What is the difference between battery and ultracapacitor storage? Energy storage is not just a box. I was going to say black box, but then I realized that might not be that appropriate. It's not just a box. It has parameters. It has certain behavioral aspects. And batteries as such, they can store a lot of energy, but they take their sweet time releasing it. So you can think of batteries as marathon runners. They release a lot of energy over a course of a little bit more than 2 hours and do that quite slowly. And you can think about ultracapacitors as a sprinter, or in this case, Usain Bolt. That releases a lot of energy, a lot of power in just 10 seconds, and then it's done. Out of energy. So batteries are more or less an energy source, and ultracapacitors are a power source. And we like the saying that batteries are in the kilowatt-hour business, and ultracapacitors are in the megawatt-second business. Producing a lot of power or releasing a lot of power in a short time frame of 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So how should these different modes of energy storage be used in logistics, mobility? Well, one good example where there is already abundant electrification is warehouse robotics. Because there is no way you can have an internal combustion engine running in your warehouse robot. You just can't get the exhaust gases out easily enough. So today's robots do use both of these storage technologies in their warehouse robots. So one way to do it, and I've heard here before today, the wrong way to do it is to use a battery. And the way you do that is you charge it 2 to 4 hours per day and let it run the rest of the time, 22 hours. But the trouble with the battery is you cannot charge it too fast. When I tell you that the battery in your phone may have the capability of 3,000 charge-discharge cycles, you will shout out in anger, that is not true. I cannot get more than 1.5 years out of my iPhone, right? True? Apple even had to reduce the power of the phones in order to, keep your battery healthy. And that is why, to keep a battery like that healthy, you need at least 4 hours to charge it. Or you could swap it. What a nice idea. Well, but then you need a swapping station and a person or a robot, probably an expensive one, to do that battery swapping. So why not use a different technology which can just, along the route, make small stops, 3 seconds each, amounting to less than an hour per day. And that would be ultracapacitors. And this is what we are doing together with a company called Robotics in the States. And my, are they growing fast. That's very nice for us. Let's take the next one, the port cranes. Do you know how much a port crane uses fuel to shift these 28 or 40-ton containers? It's about 20 liters an hour. If you take a modern crane, it's 9 liters per hour. How many hours per year do they operate? Average is 6,000 hours per year. That is, let's average everything out. That could be about 100,000 euros in fuel costs. Wouldn't it be nice to save a little bit of that? 30% would be good. But recently we have been looking more into the data that how much could be saved. If we put more ultracapacitors on it, it's a bit costly for now, but ultracapacitor prices are dropping, or rather you could say our production costs are dropping and we're putting more energy in them. So if you size the system right and you reduce the generator size and put, for God's sakes, put a start-stop system on it so it doesn't idle when it's doing nothing, then theoretically you should be at 75% of savings. That is, I didn't calculate how many tons of CO2, a lot saved. But also, and possibly more importantly, about 75,000 euros saved. And this is something which is quite important, that port owners, fleet managers of cars, yeah, they like the environment, they would like to keep it, but the bottom line is more something which is more real. So saving 70,000 euros per year in fuel, in operating one of these cranes in the port, is what gets people interested. And they have. Oh man, something's happened here. Yep. Well, I just have to talk you through it, I guess. You can take a lot of, now we're going to the mobility part. You can take a lot of different market studies, and here's one of them. It's about in the middle, about the prediction, how many electric cars and plug-in hybrid vehicles are we going to probably produce in the coming years? And you see, 10 years from now, 20%, 5 years from now, 12%. Okay. The total number of cars produced in those years is predicted at a little bit over 100 million produced. But what has gone missing from this picture, I'm very sorry, and actually it's somebody else's fault, is that hybrids are somewhere here. Hybrids is where not only this study, but other studies see most of the CO2 savings coming from in transport. Not full EVs with large batteries, but something which tries to balance between using the known and cheap technology of internal combustion and a little help from a 48-volt system assisting when you take off from the red light or are braking for the red light. And in the long term, I'm pretty sure that full electric vehicles, including hydrogen vehicles, not just the battery ones, including hydrogen ones, will be the more cost-effective option and will save more CO2. But for now, automakers seem to be sticking to what they know and tinkering with the technology a little bit in order to add some electric drive into the mix. And well, in the next slide, I'm going to really boast. This is what we are seeing from our customers. So Skeleton Technologies as a company got a first nomination from a German automaker supply in July this year. There are 500 million euros worth of deals just on the edge of signature, and the largest project we are talking about to an automaker would singly be 1 billion euros per year. And this would require more than 100 million ultracapacitors to be produced per year. So that's good for us. How good or not good is that for the world at large? Let me skip a slide. So if you make an idealistic calculation, then you end up with this number, and whoever wants, I will send the Excel. You can play around with what you think is correct. But one ultracapacitor produced, sorry, I don't have one with me, but it's about this size. One ultracapacitor produced can save as much CO2 as 166 trees in a year, or a single tree in 166 years. So one ultracapacitor is worth basically a tree. One small thing, worth a tree, and people are asking 100 million of them per year from us. This is not a signed deal or anything like that, but this is what the theoretical calculation tells us. Wow. And there's, a few hundred people in Skeleton Technologies. In a couple of years, maybe I can go around and say, I have planted millions of trees. How many have you planted? It's a roundabout way of going about it, but yeah, we might make an impact. By the way, if we did produce 100 million ultracapacitors. And that's a bit of a stretch and dream. But if we did produce 100 million ultracapacitors per year, that would be the equivalent of filling Estonia with a new forest end to end. Not bad. So yes, we do like to say we help to save energy and CO2 emissions and so on. So thank you.